This stream is live. Hi, everyone. There we are. There we are. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this talk about strategies for opening and continuing in brand building and all the things you read in the list. My name's Taylor. I work for a company called GoTab, which is a point of sale company. But before I did that, I worked in brewing, I worked in hospitality, and I opened a lot of locations. So that's why when I got tapped to do this talk, I was really excited about it. I want to share some stories with you. I want to talk about some things. And please don't be afraid. Raise your hand, put your questions in the comments. I will see them. And if it's relevant to what I'm saying, I'll answer it in the moment. Otherwise, when we get to the end, I'll read whatever is stacked up. But I'm just going to go ahead and get started by saying, like, this isn't really going to be a how-to. This isn't brewery startups 101. This isn't how to go get a business license. This isn't how to talk to the county. I'm going to address those things in brief, but this is more about being successful in the process of doing that. By the time you've gotten to this point, I would hope that we've already kind of learned, what we need to do. There's some 5 points in the next slide that I'll talk about that sort of address that process, but really what I want to talk about here is operations, and everything I'm saying is kind of going to boil down into one phrase, and that's don't step over dollars to pick up nickels, or don't be penny wise and pound foolish, depending on where you're from and how you've heard that phrase before. But first, let's talk about different operations, and that, I know that's on the list of things that's kind of at the bottom, but I think it's really important because there's a couple different types of brewery startups, and I'm really impassioned about this particular part of hospitality, the hospitality side of this business. And 25 years, I'll say in total confidence, like, you will never make less money giving better service, giving more hospitality. But it doesn't have to mean that you're sending a server to a table with a handheld device or making somebody scan a QR code. All of those things work in service of giving better hospitality, but you don't necessarily need those things. It's really more of a mentality and an inviting space and a really good culture inside of your business. So I think there's really a misconception in this sector that I've seen. Like I said, my background was kind of like super fine dining, and I worked in hotels, and then I got into brewing because that was all just boring and snooty. But I think there's a misconception here that all you really have to do is hang up a sign and throw in a brew house, with a couple of chairs, and you've got a brewery. And I think there's a lot more to it than that. You can have a rad logo, and you can have really good merch, and you can have really great beer. You have to have really great beer. It's more than great beer. What it is creating this environment where people want to come, where they want to hang out, where they want to, they want to talk to your staff about beer, and they want to know that they're welcome to talk about it and ask questions and not feel like they're, being discounted or waved off because they have a question about, what's the difference between a West Coast IPA and a New England IPA, or, why is the English bitter called a bitter? Those kind of things those just little details that don't seem very important and very innocuous can actually lead to a really great experience for people. So I think I want to break this up into two pieces. And the first one is the quintessential brewery startup, and I've seen these throughout my life, and, you might be ready to open one, or maybe you have just opened one. But essentially, like, you made some money somehow, you got a loan, or you made it yourself. A lot of you tech nerds out there made some money, you want to start a brewery. That's great. You're brewing at home, you're good at it, you won some awards, maybe you won a ribbon at a county fair, or a homebrewers contest or whatever. And you're ready to bring this to the people, and you want to open up a space, but maybe you also don't have any hospitality experience, and you don't want to have a kitchen, and you don't want to have a lot of these circumstances that you think, like, I'm not trying to be Stone Brewing or some other big, like, hospitality operation. But I don't really think that you need to have that experience, to give a great experience to your customers. But secondly, a more kind of service-oriented operation, maybe you're starting up a brewery, or maybe you're opening up your second location, and you're ready to put in a kitchen, you're ready to kind of move forward and be a little bit more, seated, a little bit more serviced, that kind of thing. I think that's kind of like the separation there. And of course, we all know that there's venture-backed operations that are built, with the intent of selling out to AB InBev or whatever, and those are in a different place. I think we're talking about somebody who's really brewing from the heart, really wants to open up this space and create a community around them, and that's where my experience lies. Now, I used to work for what is now a rather large brewery called Drake's Brewing in the Bay Area in California, but it started off as a single operation on there's a 7-barrel system that was a completely different brewery, and that begat this, what is now an empire. And I think that's the trajectory that I like to talk about. But one thing Drake's does really well, and one thing Maui Brewing does, or other Half Brewing, or I already mentioned Stoned, like these are hospitality companies. They give really good service to people, even if it's just in a location that is a bar with some taps. And you don't need to do all of those things to give really great service. Right? It doesn't have to be a 20,000 square foot operation with 25 servers and an armory in the kitchen or any of that. I think you can still really give really great service from behind the bar. And it's really just a cultural thing that you, the owner, the brewer, the operator, and a lot of the times you're all of those things. You might even also be the bartender, depending on what your circumstances are. So I'm going to get into a couple of things about pre-opening. And this is a little bit more technical than theoretical, but so I call this pre-opening jitters. And really, like, pre-opening, you probably came up with a name at some point already, and that name is really what is in a name. There's a lot in a name. So I think, at this point, like, you've got a brew house ordered, or at least what your trajectory is. You're looking at a property, maybe you've got a lease in the works. Clearly, let's run down the checklist here. I mean, obviously, you have to have your business license, your occupancy, your safety certifications, probably lead cards, or whatever your state calls their alcohol service card, those kind of things, your seller's permit and your liquor license. Like, those are the basics. But in today's market, breweries are really common. And there's some shrinkage happening, and I think that makes it a little bit more important to really stand out. And I'm going to keep touching on this. It's more important than just having great beer. It's about having great space, great people. Unlike 30 years ago when craft brewing was new and it was called microbrewing or whatever, it's harder now because there's more people. There's a brewery on every block. There's going to be a brewery in every gas station at some point. So you can't just have good beer and clean chairs. This is not enough anymore. You're applying to people's tastes. You're making a statement with all the way down to your title. And I'm going to call out some friends of mine, really great brewery in Nashville called Fate La Force. And Fate La Force is a really strong name, really strong brewery. It means strength and unity. And they picked that name because it describes how they feel. It describes who they are. They're really involved in their community. They're very involved in Nashville and all different facets of culture down there. They're very, very heavily involved in that. And they're very vocal about the fact that they do support that. That's a big part of what they do. And I think there's probably no better example, fresh in my mind anyway, of a brewery that's like, this is who we are. This is what we're calling ourselves. And they're also a really great Belgian brewery. So Fate La Force, it also ties in. So you have identity and you have a statement about who you are. And I think that's really special, and if you can achieve something that high, I think you're really, really off to a good start. Like, I think the point here is, like, if you're going to call yourself Sonic Death Monkey Brewing, I would expect some really like avant-garde prog metal playing in the background, and like John Cusack movies and really big like hoppy IPAs. I think there should be some continuity between the statement that you make with your branding and the brewery that you really are. To be fair, I think, I don't know that you need to overthink it, and I don't want to really belabor the issue. Call your brewery what you want to call it, but I think there's, a clever name is cool. A catchy name is cool. A catchy and clever name that also makes a statement is even better. So don't put too much effort into it, but also don't put no effort into it. Bob's Bubbly Beer Co. is not a great name. So, like I said, if you own this business, you really want it to reflect your personality. You want it to reflect your sense of community. And brewers are a big part of community. People gather there. People like to have events there. I think there's a lot of ideal situations where people go to breweries after an activity, whether they're long-range bicyclists or, pickleball players or volleyball players or whatever it might be. Whatever is in your immediate area, those people are going to want to drink beer afterwards. So, you definitely want to appeal to those. And there's also a decision that you have to make. We've kind of become the public house again, and there's going to be families showing up. We'll talk about alternative beverages in a few minutes, but as you're building your business plan, I think the general statement here is having if we build it, they will come mentality. It's not going to get you all the way. I mean, it'll get the doors open, it'll get beer in people's hands, but we're trying to grow a brand here. We're trying to be successful. We're here to make money. We love brewing beer. We love making money with beer. Sorry. So, let's start off from success with the beginning. And I spent the majority of my career in restaurants and hotels, and I saw this "if we build it, they will come" mentality there too. And I think that it's just indicative of maybe, either being afraid to take risks, or maybe not an understanding of the market, or not listening and understanding the customer. And I've seen places, I've worked in places that really tried to change the way the customers behave, and at some point you have to admit to yourself, like, what does my customer do? What does my customer drink? How does my customer drink? How do they eat? Or whatever. You're in this to make beer, but you're also in this to sell beer. So you want to have an inviting space. You want to have, plenty of seating, good lighting, music that's not too loud, sound dampening. I can't say that enough. The one piece of advice, if you asked me for one piece of advice and I had 30 seconds, I would say build your brewery with sound dampening so you can have music and people can still hear. And being sensitive to budgets is good. I think that people get overly ambitious, and starting small isn't a terrible thing. One thing I learned, and I probably opened, I don't know, maybe a dozen, maybe a couple more restaurants, breweries, a couple of hotels. And I think that starting off too ambitious is always a bad thing. And I've made this mistake too. I opened a restaurant once with this massive, complicated menu, and it was just a disaster because that's not how my customer ate. I was letting my ego drive, and I put this menu out that I really loved, but we couldn't keep up with it at the volume we were doing. So you have to take a step back. You have to admit, what are we here to do, and what does our customer find value in? So like I said, I don't feel compelled to spend a ton of time talking about individual processes of like how to attain a business license, how to do all of these things. There's plenty of resources out there, and I think that's a whole other conversation that doesn't really need to come in here. But the most important thing, I think, in this pre-opening thing, once we've decided who we are, what our name is, what we're going to move forward with, what the place is going to look like. So we've maybe you've hired an architect if you can afford it. You're working on a design. You're trying to work on a budget, and having a budget is really important. This is my first point. If you don't know how to create a budget, learn how to, or find somebody that can help you with it. Understand how much money you have to spend, what's liquid, what's loans, what is financed, and spend. It's not about pinching every penny, but it's also not about blowing all of the money. You might think, the brewery is the money maker. So let's buy the most expensive brew house we can find. And you should definitely buy a quality brew house, but you should also budget in, comfortable space, a good sound system, sound dampening. What's your staff going to, how much money are you going to need to pay staff before you really start turning a profit? What is your first batch of ingredients going to cost? Having this budget, it gives you parameters to work inside, and being organized is really important in opening restaurants. That's what 3, 2, 1 countdown means. And this is sort of a working backwards from an opening date. But, as far as policies and procedures and getting your licenses and getting your people trained, like I said, you'll find local resources. Every county is different, so it's kind of hard to speak. All of my restaurant opening experience is in California. And every, even municipalities are different. Just in the Bay Area, I opened a spot in Oakland, which is right next to Berkeley, but Berkeley has their own, set of policies and departments that subvert the county level, and it just gets complicated. So I don't really want to get into that minutia. But I think, having the experience in doing that as you're going through the process, always be nice to these people. They're humans too. They have a job. You're not the only person that needs something from them. But also, I will say that things get lost, things get, looked over. Plans that are incorrect will get stamped off by one inspector at the early stage, and then another inspector will see it and ask, and try to make you change something. So it's important to just be aware of what's going on. If you have a good contractor, you should have standing meetings with them. You should understand what's happening in your build out at all times, and really, try to avoid those change orders. If you're really on a budget, you got to avoid those change orders. So make sure you have a plan, go in, get it done in that sense. I mean, there's always going to be a change order. Something's going to happen. You'll have to move an electrical outlet or something. But if you can mitigate that damage, that'll really keep your expense in opening, as low as it can possibly be. Definitely prioritizing your build out and your occupancy and your liquor license. You want to get that done early. You want to get your brew house installed. You want to get that first batch of beer in. You want to get the pilot batches to make sure you know how to use this thing. You got to run water through it, all of those things. But it's also important, to stay on track. So you want to get those things squared away early, have a punch list. And I like to use a calendar, like a reverse calendar. So I think at this point, I actually want to take a little diversion into food again, because when you're concepting and when you're going through this permitting process, you highly have to make that decision. if you're going to serve food or not. I was a chef my whole life. That was my career. I happened to work in brewing, for quite a long time. Now I work in technology, but I do think you should have food in some capacity, and I think you should work with your local authorities on, even if it's literally just a turbo fan or a turbo chef, and you serve frozen pizzas or pretzels. I think if you do better than chips and pretzels, or like hard pretzels, you're going to sell more beer. People get the munchies when they drink. People want to have food. People don't want to leave to go get food. So, that being said, I get it. If you don't know how to manage a kitchen, or you have no interest in managing a kitchen, or you can't afford to manage a kitchen, which is, a bigger consideration. My gut reaction to say is learn to deal with it, or hire somebody that knows how to deal with it, because you don't need to have stir-fried noodles in a steakhouse or be rolling pizzas to have a successful food program. But you can have, I met a brewery the other day, actually. This is a great story. I was demoing this brewery up in Minnesota. They're way out in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota. They don't have a kitchen. They're not interested in having a kitchen. But what they did is they bought a turbo chef or a convection oven of some sort, and they just get Papa Murphy's pizza. They get take and bake pizzas. They have a menu of take and bake pizza. They buy a dozen a day or whatever it is. And when they're gone because they last a couple days, and they can cook them, and it's easy, and they don't have to put any effort into it. I mean, that is a really clever, scrappy way to spend almost no money and provide something for people that'll keep them on the patio, buying an extra beer, buying a 4-pack or whatever. I think it was actually brilliant. And I'm glad I met them prior to this, because I think it was one of the best examples I've ever seen. But this, really the logic here is where does the money get made? Food isn't very profitable. Labor is expensive, but beer is very profitable. So if you can put food in front of people and you make a little bit of money on it, or, at least break even, if not, make 5 or 10% on it, you're selling more beer. If you sell more beer, you sell more, you make more money. It just works out. So, if you're not going to do bona fide meals, if you're going to go the food truck route, this is also great. But I think during this planning phase is a good time, and this will be about the 30-day mark when we get to the countdown. But it's a good idea to have that figured out, have that plan ready in your organization list. Make sure, okay, we're going to do food trucks. There's 3 that I really like. I want to contact them. I want to get this done. When we're 90 days to 180 days out from opening, let's have a plan of that food. But at the same time, don't just count on them. Have some snacks. Don't just go to Costco and buy, the bags of chips that we all got in our lunches as kids. Get some nice stuff. Take care of it. Maybe find a small time or a local food vendor. Going back to Fate La Force again, they work with a local bakery that makes some hand pies. It's a real simple thing, and they don't have to put any effort into it. And again, it's like a hospitality item. I want to keep saying hospitality over and over again, because I think it's the most important thing. There's no reason why you shouldn't let people spend money, unless you hate money and you don't want to be profitable. Let people spend money in any way they want. And then thank you for coming to my TED Talk about food. Anyway, so those things are done and the build out is underway. It is important to have a starting date, and this is where we get to the countdown. So basically you should have a date in mind, as you've worked with your contractor and you've gotten your licenses and permits and you're starting your build out, or your remodel, whatever you're doing, there should be some date when you get the keys handed over to you, and your opening date should be very close to that. A week, 2 weeks on the outside. You've got to start making money. So whenever I'm opening a restaurant, one of the most important things I do is when I have that date range, we put a pin in the calendar and we start working backwards. So working backwards from there, I break it out into 30-day blocks. Sort of. Starting at 180 days. This is where we have on the punch list, vendors are sorted out. We know when the first delivery of grain is coming in. We know when the brew house is going to be commissioned. Plans are submitted for everything. Balls are rolling on permits. We're just waiting for sign off on occupancy and fire and all those things. And then at this point, this is when you really want to start thinking about social media. And, this is like a cart before the horse moment. I've met some breweries that are really all about, they're starting with their branding and trying to get people excited about it, and they're not even raising capital for their build out yet. So I would advise, if you had hired me to consult for you, have something tangible and then start talking about it. Because at this point, if you have people talking about it and they're excited about it, you're posting stuff on social media, you're now posting pictures of your build out and you're bringing people in to your community, from day one. And people will get attached to that. Like, oh, wow, I remember when this was, just a pile of metal and concrete, and all the way up to the finished product. And it's really special. And along that journey in your social media, as you get to the 90-day, 60-day, 30-day, 10-day marks, now you can start throwing out gift cards, selling gift cards, throwing out free gift cards, sneaky invites to soft openings, getting people, excited about it along the way, and bringing them along the journey with you. So you're starting to build that community from day one. Photo journal, you can't say it enough. So then 90 days would be the next major milestone. And I would say, break this down into any section of days that's comfortable for you. I'm kind of just using big blocks here, but at the 90-day point, make sure we're still on track. At this point, we're not necessarily talking about adjusting opening dates, but we just want to be aware of where we're sitting on that. Is the build out going well? Was the brew house held up in shipping? Is the furniture held up? Whatever it might be. Managing build outs is difficult if you're not doing it yourself. If you are doing it yourself, it's also difficult, but for a lot of different reasons. But hopefully by 90 days, the brew house is at least on property if it's not put together and commissioned, and have it scheduled to be commissioned. Draft system is probably going in, you have your cold box delivered, bar is built. That's would make me feel good if I saw those things happening. At the 60-day point, another 30 days has gone by. This is where things start to heat up. It's more of the same. We should be having standing meetings with the contractors. We should be making sure we're checking up on permits. We should have dates for finals, dates for checkup appointments. All of those things should be scheduled here. We should have a good idea of what our final is. We should also, this is where you start thinking about your job postings. You don't want to do this too early, and you don't want to do it too soon, but you'd be surprised at how successful you can be posting a job fair, maybe just a couple of weeks and getting everybody. I have made this mistake, and take it from me. If you do your hiring too early, you will lose a lot of people, because you'll say, okay, you're hired. We start training in 60 days and they go and find another job. So timing on that is really important, but this is where you want to start thinking about that. And again, going back to our budget, we want to start thinking about our FTEs. What is an FTE? It's a full-time equivalent. So it's not necessarily an entire human, but it's an entire shift for an entire human, if that makes sense. So a person can work, 32 to 40 hours a week. That might be broken up into 2 or 3 people. So it's a full-time equivalent. So you got to look at your schedule. What are your hours? And this is really, we're talking about the tap room, not necessarily the brew house here, but for the tap room, who opens, who closes? Is that the same person? How much coverage do we need when we're busy? And then hiring based off of that, kind of a high level there, but you can find more information about that. At this point, this is where you want to start looking at your tech stack as well. POS, I know, a really good one. Back office, scheduling and payroll systems, this the stuff you're going to call me about. And I would like to put a note in here. If you are a small brewery, and I don't, not to poo-poo the idea, but I don't know that having an ERP for your brewery, or, a grain to glass system is quite necessary, like sub 500 barrels. It's a good idea, and I wouldn't tell you not to do it. But I also think, for the expense, for what your time is worth, there's probably some better resources out there, and grow into that. I would rather see you, not have it, need it, buy it, than buy it, decide you don't need it, and now you're stuck with it. You're stuck paying for the system that you're not really using. So all that really just to say, whatever you're going to use, make sure that you need it, make sure you're going to use it so you extract value out of it. Because spending money on this stuff is necessary. So you want to make sure you're extracting the maximum amount of value on this as well. So tech stack can be something as simple as just, a point of sale and QuickBooks. It could be that easy. You need some kind of payroll system, for your staff. You can do that with QuickBooks, but I recommend somebody who specializes in that. Some kind of back office system, just some kind of thing, that you can manage your business with. There's a lot of free resources out there for startups. Generally when it's free, it's more difficult to set up, and it'll be based off of a spreadsheet or something. But those resources are out there. You don't feel compelled to go, and spend all the money on this at the startup moment. But I think it's important to keep those things in your mind. You should know what a pint of beer costs you from brew one to brew infinity. You should know exactly what each pint of beer is going to cost you. Accounting, payroll, POS, these are critical. They're absolutely critical. And they deserve as much time as you can devote to them. And, having now done this for a couple of years on the POS side, and having done it let's legitimize it at 15 years opening restaurants, on the opening side. I think a lot of people don't prioritize this. They'll ask what's popular. They'll Google in this day and age. They'll Google. They'll see what's popular. They'll just pick that and not really look into what's best for them. What's going to provide them with the best value, because it's not about cheap. It's not about expensive. It's about value. And you might find better value in something you pay a little bit more for than just going for the cheapest option, especially in the startup phase, because this is a tool that's going to help you make money. It should help you make money. It should be more than taking payments, pushing buttons, giving change out. It should help you do. It should help you facilitate that. Gift cards, loyalty, all those kinds of things. Those are important. And then, accounting software. Obviously, if you don't have an accountant, you're doing that yourself. So find something that you can use. Find something that and really pay attention to it. I think a lot of people will spend the first year and it feels really crazy, and they're just trying to make beer and trying to sell beer, and they can't take a breath. And it can be a couple of years before they realize the cost of things. And I hate to see somebody go out of business when they were fully making money, but they were spending too much, is really where I'm going with that. So moving on, now we're at the 30-day mark. If you're going to hire a manager, this is the time to do it. 30 days prior to opening. Obviously this date, by 30 days, your contractor should know for sure when they're going to hand keys over. You should have a brew house. There should be, you should have occupancy by now. Fire should be done by now. Final health should be, if not scheduled, done by now. Because now it's go time. Now it's time for the contractors. Maybe there's some painting, maybe there's some final trim on the electrical or whatever to happen, but it's time for them to get out of the way so you can start setting your furniture up, so you can start decorating, and making this space yours. So that's a really important benchmark, and this is where everything gets critical, and it's go time. And if you're not a hospitality-minded person and you just want to brew or you just want to have this business, I implore you, put it in your budget. Hire somebody with hospitality experience who knows how to do it. If they've done an opening before, even better. Because managing job fairs and figuring out these FTE schedules, figuring out food offerings and all that stuff, you need a partner in that. And if you don't have the experience or the knowledge, or you're nervous about it, then just hire somebody that knows what they're doing. It's really, really important. And somebody who's going to, who knows that they're going to put in long hours and for little pay for a long time, for, hopefully big returns in the future. So now the timeline starts speeding up. As you can see, we were kind of like doing this in halves. It was 180, then it was 90, then it was 60, then it was 30. Now we're, at day, let's say we're at 14 days. We know for sure we've got an opening date. I think here staff should really be hired. And this is where we know what the launch beers are. And again, I'm going to reinforce this. Don't feel like you need to launch with 14 beers and a sour program. Just get the doors open. You've already got your friends coming. You've been working on this social media base. You're giving out, maybe you're giving out some vouchers. You're inviting people to soft openings. You're selling gift cards, hopefully like crazy. And it's, 14 days to open. I mean, I could probably talk to you about this for a couple hours. So I'm not going to. I'm going to try to keep this really high level. But what you want to do, like at this point, you're planning your training, and it seems so arbitrary, right? I'm opening up a 5-barrel brewery. I'm going to have 10 beers on draft, and I'm going to have like 5 employees. But even with those 5 employees, like this is that moment where everything comes together. You've got these 5 people. They're excited about your beer. They're excited to work at your brewery. And you're now, indoctrinating them, for lack of a better term. I see some questions. Nope. That's Andrew. You're bringing them into the fold, right? So we want to get them excited about beer. We want them to be knowledgeable about beer. And I'm going to take a tangent into hospitality again, because that's really what I'm impassioned about is, providing hospitality will always make you more money. And this is where we get them excited. I'm going to give you this example. I don't know that this is necessarily the best path for everyone, but when I worked at Drake's, we had this really big beer garden, and it had a lot of servers that worked, and we were very passionate about beer. So we decided amongst ourselves that we would literally pay for our staff to get their level 1 CBS, the Cicerone CBS level 1. It was like $60 if you buy a bunch of them or whatever. But we also required that they pass that to wait tables in our restaurant. And it was very important to us that, I don't need you to know the difference between Mosaic and Citra and Idaho 7. But what I do need you to know is what's the difference between an extra pale and an IPA? What is a New England IPA? What are those things? What can we do? What information can we possess that can make our customers feel more comfortable? So in terms of hospitality, this is really where you build in that culture. This is where you establish that we are in business to make money with beer. We love beer, but we're also welcoming and we're knowledgeable, and we're going to get our customers excited about that too. And a level of excitement is critically important to all of this. And then one final thing is, do your soft opening. So maybe you're at, we're ready to go. The floors are waxed. The staff is trained. They've got their logoed t-shirts. We're ready to go. Don't be afraid to just open the doors quietly on a Monday, overstaff, burn a little bit of labor dollars, have 2 bartenders when all you need is 1, and just let the space breathe, let people come in, and then trickle some money through the door, hang that dollar bill on the wall, and then do a blast, now open, the following week or whatever. I think that's a really good way to do it. I've seen places try to do big, grandiose grand openings, and there's a line out the door, and it's a disaster because openings are tough. They're just very hard. In these training days, this is when mistakes get made. This is when questions get asked. This is when we figure out that the pressures, we thought they were perfect, and it turns out the gas mix on a beer was bad, and we need some time to fix it or whatever. Give yourself that time, and then go big. Because then a lot of people, I think, also make the mistake of trying to train while they're open, and there's nothing worse. And I understand budget. Absolutely, I understand. It's worth it to not step over that nickel to make a dollar. I'm sorry, not step over that dollar to save that nickel, because you spend a couple days in labor and they have some time. It's a controlled environment. They're going to learn more, and you really want to catch them at their peak. Right when they're the best. That's when you want to open the doors and you want to hit them hard. So plan a really big soft opening, a friends and family. Pack that place out. Really make them feel the pressure. It's absolutely worth your time, to lose that little bit of cost on product and labor to get that well-oiled machine ready for the public. So moving on, I'm going to finally change slides now. So now you're open, and you can see I've titled this slide Step 3 blank, Step 4 profit. 10 points to you if you get the reference. This is a big, important topic to me. I run a consulting business, prior to doing this current job that I'm doing. And I've seen a lot of people sort of make this mistake. And this kind of harkens back to the beginning of my talk where I said, you can't just have this, if we build it, they will come mentality. That's really what Step 3 blank, Step 4 profit means, particularly means to me. You really have to have a plan. So you're open, you're bringing in new customers, and that's the point right now. The point right now is to bring in new customers. But old conventions and traditional wisdom tell us that the majority of sales are going to come from a small minority of repeat customers. And in the back, let's keep in mind that it's not just about great beer. That's only half of the battle. You want to build loyalty. You want people to come in. You want them to spend their hard-earned money at only your brewery. And having good beer, it's definitely a big part of the equation. It's what we do. It's what we're passionate about. But it's making people feel good about drinking that beer and coming in and wanting to hang out. If you're small enough place and you have a loyal enough base and you just know them by their name, and you can put their favorite beer in front of them, like those little things go so far. And building that loyalty, what I want to really talk about here is it's not just punch cards. It's not just rewards points. It's not, keychains or whatever you do to go about that. It's really about engagement and service, commonly known as hospitality. It's critically important to build that sense of community and culture. So you spend all this time in, bringing your staff into that. Now it's your staff's turn to bring your customers into that culture, make them feel like they're part of it. Making sure people are knowledgeable about your product is really important. And making sure, their general knowledge of beer, it goes a lot farther. I think, I think that if your staff can speak with authority about beer and not just ask people what they want, you're absolutely going to make a much better experience for people. Again, I don't need to know what alpha acids are for, but you should know what the difference between a porter and a stout is. So bringing customers into that, it comes from the bartenders and servers. Again, it's a cultural thing. We built it. They're now going to continue it. And it's really about, making people feel. People will go into a brewery and they'll order whatever their favorite style is and then judge you based on that. Most of the time it's IPA, sure. So here's an example, kind of an anecdotal example of, I think what an ideal service element, and this can be at a table, it can be at a bar. It really doesn't matter where it's taking place. But let's just say, Andrew is sitting at table 10 and he orders the flagship IPA. Taylor, the bartender, recognizes that Andrew is a new customer and probably ordering the IPA because it's a safe place to start. So Taylor, thinking about that, also pours, a taster of the new wet hop Mosaic IPA and a taster of a Kvike Extra Pale, and just takes them over to the table. Here's your IPA. I thought you might enjoy these other 2 beers. Go ahead and try those. Then let me know if you want another one. So we can talk about those beers for a few minutes. Oh, what is Kvike yeast? What is Mosaic hops? What is the difference between a fresh hop beer and a dry hop beer? We can have that little, 30 or 40-second conversation that now sets up this relationship to go off into the future, because he's immediately welcomed, he's immediately accepted. But more importantly is he sees that I've anticipated his needs, but from a pragmatic sense, I'm also setting him up for the next round. This customer, Andrew, maybe he walked up to the bar, maybe he's at a table, it doesn't really matter. But, if there's a line at the bar and you're doing just bar service, Andrew might not stand in that line to get a second beer. If, maybe he didn't like the IPA so much. Maybe it was too bitter. Maybe it was, too something. Maybe he's more of an extra pale drinker and he doesn't know it. So by setting him up with those other 2 beers, I've got him anticipating the next round, and he'll probably be more likely to come up and try another beer if I've done that, right? So it's taken me no effort and it's taken me no cost other than a couple ounces of beer and a little bit of time. And again, it can be done at the bar, it can be done at a table, it doesn't matter. And Andrew will leave being far more likely to talk about your business to his friends and that experience. It's kind of the difference between, Andrew saying, oh yeah, I went to Sonic Death Monkey and I had the IPA and it was pretty good, to, oh my God, I love that place. Like, everybody knew so much about the beer and they explained it to me, and they just knew how to anticipate my needs, or they knew, they gave me a beer that I would never even think of trying and I loved it. Like, that's what people talk about. That's what word of mouth advertising is. And that's what hospitality does for that. And the antithesis of this is, and you've all been in one, it's this industrial park brewery that started up, maybe they're a couple years in, and they're really into themselves and they're really into this small but appreciative group of people that they've got, but nobody really goes back there for the most part because they don't get good hospitality. Maybe the beer is good, maybe the beer is okay. That doesn't really matter in this point. What the point is that, to get them over the line, if they had just been a little bit nicer, if they had just been a little bit more friendly, not force me to keep buying things to get tasters, or just had a decent conversation, I probably would have gone back there. And I think we've all experienced that. I do want to talk about merch a little bit in this sense. This is about brand building, really, is what we're talking about. And I think merch is important for brand building. And I think this is another tenuous place for people, because it's expensive. It's really expensive. You have purchase minimums. You don't know what people want. You have to have all the right sizes. And it's just this really daunting task. So I don't want to get into really too much of it. I've also only got a few minutes left. So what I want to say about merch is have a small amount. Don't try to make money on it. Biggest advice I can give on merch is put it into your marketing budget, sell them for maybe cost plus 10%, whatever it is. Don't lose money on it, but break even on it. Don't sell hoodies for $50 if they cost you $20. I don't think it's not getting the brand out. Be ready to give away stickers, be ready to give away buttons. Build yourself a budget for these things. And think of them as marketing costs, not necessarily as a profit center. So with that, we can get into pitfalls, do's and don'ts, and really kind of takeaways. One thing, hospitality, no is not greater than yes. Yes is absolutely better than no, which is better than maybe. Try to have a yes mentality. And you don't have to be Applebee's to do this. You don't have to have, your 15 pieces of flair on your suspenders to do this. Just be engaged with your customers, understand the way that they drink, and, remember that we're in the hospitality business. Yes, it's a brewery. Yes, it's a bar, but I think for the most part, because of the nature of breweries, especially when you have the food truck or you have the kitchen, it turns into this family space. Maybe you've got cornhole or maybe you've got hook and ring games or whatever it might be. People are gathering there to hang out and feel welcome. And your staff really needs to reflect that. And, maybe you go to places and the staff isn't attentive, and yeah, it's busy because the beer is good, but I will guarantee you, from my experience and just from my experience as an operator and as a customer, I'm going to spend more money. I'm going to have more time. I'm going to take more 4-packs home from a place where the people are really knowledgeable and will just take that moment. You don't have to feel special. It's just about taking that extra little moment to make your customers feel welcome. And that's really what I mean when you see, understanding your customers and prioritizing them. That's really what it's about. Everybody hates going to any bar where, the bartender's looking at the television and they know, that they know that you're there and they're just going to make you wait. This is what I'm trying to get you to avoid. Staying on trend. Next topic, don't be afraid to stay on trend. I mentioned that we were going to talk about alternative beverages, and this is where I want to talk about that. It's unless you hate money, there's no reason to not have something available. Have a good soft drink. Sometimes it's a designated driver that's ordering that drink. It's not just, for a kid or for somebody. And having just a water and a can of Coke, you can do better than that. You can put kombucha on draft very easily. You can have nitro coffee. You can have non-alcoholic beer. You can have gluten-free beer. Now, it's great. A couple of great gluten-free breweries. Shout out to Holidaily and to Buckwild as being really excellent gluten-free breweries that are just putting beer in other breweries. That's a great thing. Kombuchas, hard kombuchas. And I understand the reticence of we're a brewery, we brew beer, but these days, it's as implicit as having an IPA or a hazy that you're going to have a seltzer. So just do it, and like I said, you can throw on, it doesn't even necessarily need to be a wine or a cider, but the thing is, the person that's coming there and ordering that hard tea or that hard kombucha, they're there because they're with a friend who loves your beer or who wants to try your beer. So there's no reason to not welcome that person. There's no reason to not take that money. And I do understand that in some places, licensing doesn't allow that. But I think, when you're in the planning phase, it's important to find out what you can do. And definitely have some good soft drinks. I'm not saying cater to kids. I'm saying cater to designated drivers, cater to people who just want to have a drink that's not a beer, because that does happen. And then lastly, as we're winding down, we only got a couple minutes left, but collect good data. And, obviously I work in technology, I work in data. It's really important to have good data and to use that data, but it's also a pitfall, in my opinion, for people who try to run their business from the office. This is a hospitality business, and data is important to reinforce your gut instincts, but also you have senses, you have eyes, you have ears. You can look in your tap room, you can look in your dining room. When it's busy, it's going to be busy on Fridays. How to staff accordingly to that. So, I think it's really important, and I run into this a lot, which is why I wanted to mention it, is that people try to rely way too heavily on data and not on their 5 senses, when this is very, tactile business and very emotional business. So you're not necessarily adding any value to your own life by having extensive amounts of, drill down reports and knowing what your sales by 15 minutes are. All these things can be useful if you're making $30 million a year, but if you're a standalone brewery, just look at what's happening, and waste your, what is your time worth? Where is your time better spent, analyzing data or running your tap room? So I hope any of that was useful. If there are any last minute questions, please throw them in the comments. Otherwise, thank you everybody for coming. And I really hope this was useful, and I'll see you to the next one.